Tracey, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Phoebe. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Thank you once again for honoring our invitation, and we really appreciate your time and the insight you're going to share today. So, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Hello, viewers. Welcome to our Talk to Phoebe podcast, where we explore leadership, innovation, personal growth, and the people transforming around the world. I'm your host, Phoebe. Today, I'm honored to welcome Tracey Groove. Tracey is an award-winning leadership development consultant, executive coach, speaker, and author of Taming the Sabbath, Resilient Leadership in Stressful World. She specializes in helping leaders improve effectiveness, amplify employee engagement, build resilient cultures, and navigate uncertainty with courage and confidence. Her work combines organizational psychology, neuroscience, positive psychology, and executive coaching to help leaders create sustainable behavioral change that lasts. Tracey, you're welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So let's dive in. Tracey, you spent years helping leaders transform themselves and organization. What originally sparked your passion for leadership development?
For me, it's really been in an environment that was challenging. So could have even have been said, but it was toxic potentially. So it was really my experience and the years that I spent within a corporate environment that takes a lot out of leaders and takes a lot out of the people that they lead. And so I really wanted to focus on how to bring that resilience, that ability to bounce back from challenging environments, challenging situations, and just deal with the stress that I think a lot of leaders deal with day to day in a way that feels like you're still authentic to who you are, and you can overcome the fear that leaders are often experiencing when they are in environments like that. So my own experience in those kind of environments and working with a lot of clients, a lot of coaching clients who are struggling with this is what really got me into focusing on leadership development, because I think that's one of the most important parts of an organizational culture is what the leaders bring, because really they are the ones that help to set the tone, and a lot of their teams take their cue from those leaders. So if a leader is struggling and is being crushed by a culture that is not helping them to thrive and not just survive, then really that is so important to help those leaders to build those skills so they can in turn help their teams and help carry them on the journey as well. So that's really what got me into it, was the desire to make a real difference for the people who are being asked to carry a lot, and even more so now in an age of AI.
Yes. Oh, we're going to get there. That's awesome. Yeah. So how has leadership evolved since you first began with your field?
It's changed dramatically, although what's interesting is that while what's expected of leaders has changed and has, I think, expanded, and there's much more disruption in their world, the skills that leaders bring to organizations and to their teams and to the companies that they serve and the communities that they serve remain as crucial now as they did back in 20 years ago. So those skills of emotional intelligence, compassion, empathy for what their teams are dealing with, what they're dealing with, but also in helping to keep their teams and hold them accountable for delivering. So there's while the pressure has changed, the I think the demands on leaders have not changed. I think they've just become more acute. And that potentially is what is shifting for leaders. It feels like a difference, but I don't necessarily think the skills that leaders can bring to bring more of their humanity to the workplace have changed. And I think the impact of doing that has increased, especially as we become more disconnected, more global, and
Yeah.
more digitized and more separated as human beings. And so helping leaders to think through how they can continue to bring that humanity, and sometimes rekindle the humanity, because in some cases leaders have had that, I guess, numbed a little bit because of the environment, just in some cases can really just beat it out of them. So how
Yeah.
do they overcome that and still feel that they're being true to themselves and building the resilience to withstand the environment, which they can't always change,
Mm.
but bring the best of themselves to that environment so that in turn they can bring the best out of their teams.
Awesome. So, what inspired you to write Taming the Sabotage?
And really, it was this notion of resilience. I wanted to understand what why some people are more resilient, why others struggle, and really wanted to test my assertion that resilience is a skill and it's a practice, and that
Mm.
it is something that can be learned and is something that is not the just the purview of a special few who have this in their DNA.
Mm.
It's really anybody can grow and learn to adapt to a changing environment and to be a little more, I guess, compassionate and kind to themselves in doing so. And a lot of that comes from just becoming aware of how they're reacting or responding to situations. And so I really wanted to test that, the notion that anyone can learn this,
Yeah.
but also that it's important to know that it is a lifelong practice. It's not, as humans, it's not something you don't just turn a switch. It's like a muscle. You have to keep using it to build it and to hone it. And so I wanted to see if there were ways I could apply some of that thinking, specifically in mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques in
Yeah.
workplaces that were highly stressful or highly challenging for teams. And I leverage that to really think about what the outcomes of those applications of that kind of stress reduction and that kind of self-awareness of the environment and also of our own reaction to it, and how that could be applied in the workplace and specifically to leaders. And so that the exploration of all of that and some
Yeah.
of the conversations that I've had and the experiences I've had myself through my career are what went into the book to help people see that, you may not be able to control your environment, but you can 100% control your response to it because
Mm.
you can choose that response versus just reacting to something.
That's very great. So, your book focuses heavily on stress and resilience, something
Yep.
every leader faces. The
Yep.
title of your book immediately captured attention. What
Mm.
does sabotage represent?
So the saber tooth is really, I was thinking about this when I was writing the book, as I wanted to help people understand that the way that we as human beings react to stresses in our environment
Mhm.
hasn't changed
Yeah.
since our evolution began. And so the saber tooth, which in the days of our ancestors was a real cat with big teeth and big claws, has changed. And in our environment now, it can take the form of so many things. The saber tooth doesn't have to have fangs anymore. Now
Yeah.
it's that really difficult conversation. Maybe it's a challenging employee that you have to deal with. Maybe it's even just a relationship that's fraught with a little bit of tension. It could be, an overloaded calendar. It can be that really high stakes presentation that you have to make. It could be a board meeting. All of these things, our brain, when it responds to these kind of stressful events,
Yeah.
responds to them exactly the same way as it used to when we were hiding behind a rock on the savannah somewhere because a saber tooth could take us out any
Yeah.
minute. So our operating system as human beings hasn't evolved. We're still operating in using a 200 million-year-old operating system in our brain to
Yeah.
deal with stressors that are in a digital age. So it's entirely changed the environment,
Mm.
but our brain doesn't adapt to that. So
Mm.
a lot of the focus in the book and the focus in a lot of my coaching and a lot of my work with leaders is to help them to first to understand this. It's okay. Being human and feeling this kind of stress is entirely normal and understandable, and in some cases necessary in order to perform well. Helping them to understand that they do have tools and ideas and concepts and mindset shifts that they can make to enable their mind to assess the situation differently
Yeah.
versus assessing it as they used to when we were being chased by big cats. So that is really where the saber tooth came from, is this
Yeah.
notion that it hasn't changed, it hasn't evolved, but we can actually evolve our thinking about it in order to address.
That's very good. So, why do successful leaders often struggle with stress management?
I think a lot of very successful people leading in whatever field or industry, I think they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And so there's a lot of, I think a perception that they have to have all the answers, that they have to, always have the solution at hand, they always have to be in control. And that lack of control or perceived lack of control is a lot of what creates that stress for
Yeah.
them. And so I think a lot of it is self-inflicted because I think we get in our own heads a lot. And we're like, okay, well, I should know this. I should be able to handle this. I should have the solution. What if I'm not seen as somebody who has all the answers?
Mhm.
All of that self-perceived, I guess, pressure is often what's happening for leaders who are very successful, because that way of thinking has served them in the past. A lot of people go through their career, always having to produce the best possible thing, always having to do, outperform everybody.
Yeah.
And so they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And I think that creates a lot of a distortion in their view of the world and their willingness to be vulnerable and ask for help, or even admit that they don't know and
Yeah.
that it's okay not to know. Because sometimes if you can help your team to co-create a solution with you by asking versus telling, that shows you as much more willing, open, and collaborative than a leader who necessarily thinks they have to have all the right answers and give instruction. So I think a lot of it is self-imposed for a lot of very successful leaders because it served them in the past. So it becomes a habit. It's a self-fulfilling habit. And that's what then leads to burnout, because they never get off that hamster wheel of always having to be the best, do the best, know the best, that kind of thing. So that's where I think just helping them to stop that for a second, pause, take a breath, and think about it, and
Yes.
maybe shift their perspective, and can help them to step away from that constant highway to burnout, and think about maybe a different route to get to where they need to go.
So, what practical strategy helps leaders remain calm and effective under pressure?
I think putting that pause in between whatever it is. So let's say, for example, something's happened and there's a deadline, there's an emergency, there's a crisis of some sort. For a lot of leaders, they feel like they have to get to the solution at speed. But if they can just give themselves a moment to just breathe and think about it, and calm down the thoughts in their heads, sometimes that can help them to actually stay calm enough to A, engage with their team, and B, to actually be open to some of the suggestions that the team might bring. So that gap between the stimulus and the response is so important. In any kind of situation where it's a high stakes conversation, it's a huge, maybe it's a huge decision point, rushing to have the solution, I think, is probably one of the fundamental challenges that leaders have to overcome in order to remain calm, and especially to remain calm consistently when their team brings problems to them. If the team knows that they're going to react in a calm and collected way and think through the problem and co-create a solution, they're much more likely to come to them with problems versus trying to hide the problems, right? If they have a leader who blows up or explodes or has a horrible time dealing with change or issues or conflict. So that give yourself a moment to just breathe and then step into the space of, okay, how are we going to deal with this together? Because there's no point in tearing your hair out and having an emotional reaction to something, because that shuts down your ability to think clearly. So you really want to give yourself that opportunity to think clearly. So breathing is really, really important. Just taking a pause, thinking things through, maybe not reacting right away until you've had a chance to think something through, then coming back to the conversation. These are all sort of techniques that you can do when you're dealing with different things, just to give yourself that space.
That's very nice. You often talk about bringing humanity back to work in an AI era. What does that mean?
So the interesting thing about AI is that it's doing wonders for people who have a lot of task-driven activity at work. AI can do so much to fix this stuff. So they can take away a lot of the time that's spent in research or building things, number crunching, data analysis, all of these kind of things. AI can do wonders for that. So it can take a lot of the task-based things away. And I would argue that it is giving the opportunity, by taking away a lot of that busy work, it's giving especially leaders an opportunity to think a little more strategically. And that judgment, those nuances of thinking through, is this the right thing to do? Are we still focused on the right things? Are we doing it in the right way? How have we thought about how things could be different or how we should do things better? All of those thinking applications are really only possible from a human perspective. Because when we engage with teams, we're engaging with people.
Yeah.
And so as leaders, AI can help us do the day-to-day sort of noisy stuff in order to free up our space to really do the stuff that makes us human, which
Yeah.
is putting judgment on the things that we're thinking about, making the right decisions, thinking more strategically as far as, well, how are we actually aligned with our values, with the vision that we have for this organization, with how we want to show up as human beings working together. Am I supporting my team in the right way, or am I getting in the way of my team? So all of these things, which are really the essence of working with human beings,
Yeah.
I believe AI can help leaders do more of, because they've been freed up from all the transactional stuff that was taking up a lot of the space. So it's
Yeah.
created a little bit of space, I think.
So, what leadership qualities can technology never replace?
Oh my gosh. I think empathy is one, compassion for, where the other person is in their journey, and just understanding the nuances of human behavior and the dynamics of even if you think about cultures, organizations are so global now.
Yeah.
you know, Only human beings can look another human being in the eye and say, and hold them accountable for something. And only a human being can then have a conversation with you around, well, what went wrong, or why didn't you do that? Or, how can I help? What's up with you? How are things going? So that human connection is so, so important. And those are leadership skills that I believe AI will never be able to replace, because you can't have a conversation with somebody at a relational level that breaks down barriers through AI. It just doesn't work that way.
That's great. So, how can leaders embrace AI while preserving authentic connections?
Well, they really have to think about, so a lot of this I think is coming from this idea of, remote work was a big part of this. And there's been such a big pushback to go back into the office from a lot of organizations, and a lot of challenges to that push. And I think one of the reasons that, I was reading an article this morning actually about this, that one of the reasons that I think a lot of leaders want their teams to be in the office is ego driven. They really want to have those people there under their control that they can see every day, to sort of, genuflect when they when they walk down the hall in some cases, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the remote teams, it's the connection is very, very different. So I think that for leaders to be able to embrace both styles of having people in person and also talking through a screen is critical, because I think they need to do it in a way that feels like the people feel connected regardless of where they are. And that means have conversations other than just, what are you doing today? What tasks are you doing? How's the progress going? Have conversations around, how are you doing? How is
Yes.
life? Connecting with each other as human beings and getting to know each other at a deeper level is so critical. And I think leaders can do this if they are willing to take the time and put in the investment.
Yeah.
And that is the challenge. And so for leaders who have, bigger teams, or who are working with globally distributed teams and have to work remotely, it's more challenging to do that, because it means you have to carve time out of those group sessions, etc., to have conversations with each individual, or at least make yourself available. Not all individuals will want to take advantage of that, but I think it's important to have those, nothing's off the table conversations. How are you doing? Let me know. How am I stepping in to help, or how am I getting in the way?
Yeah.
And finding out how people feel about working with that leader is so important, versus just working inside an organization with systems and tools, etc. So I think they can embrace both, but that human connection and the way that they engage is the topics of the conversations, I think, are so much more important than the method of connecting.
Awesome. So, this brings us to one of the most important topics in leadership today: behavior change. Many leaders attend workshops, read books, consume leadership content, yet still little change. Why?
A lot of it is because a lot of those offerings, it's a one-time thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this workshop, and I'm going to come away and I'm going to be inspired, and I'm going to have all these great ideas, and I'm going to have all these tools. But then when they go back into the real world and the
Mhm.
day-to-day noise comes back,
Yeah.
it's very hard for them to stay with that. And it's also very hard to change behavior unless you make it a habit. So that's why in a lot of the programs that I manage with my clients, there's ongoing coaching and support and accountability and continuing to practice those skills and doing it. And it's so often as well useful for leaders to practice those kind of skills, whatever they're trying to change or trying to learn in a cohort environment so that they can learn from each other, support each other, but also hold each other accountable. So it's got to be an ongoing, keep dipping the shirt kind of practice because no change can happen overnight and be sustainable, right? Because we're human. We all go back to our old habits. We all, fall down sometimes. What's important is getting up, dusting ourselves off, and carrying on and keep trying. And so I think that is the key to a lot of workshops, programs, initiatives is I think a lot of HR departments think for somebody, they take leaders away to a 2-day offsite and problem solved. It doesn't work that way unless you can help them apply it in the real world every day and support them in doing that. And also hold them accountable for doing that if they've committed to making that change. So the level of commitment's important, but then also the shaping the environment which enables them to actually make that change is
Mm.
so important with the support surrounding it.
That's good. So, how do old habits and mental models limit leadership growth?
It's one of those things where again a lot of the habits that we as human beings or even as leaders in whatever field create for ourselves
Yeah.
often they're developed in ways that have served us in the past, right? So
Yeah.
we've done things a certain way and it's worked well for us. Maybe it doesn't work anymore, or maybe things have shifted to the point where we have to adjust our thinking or shift our perspective. So really that those habits are ingrained in us because they're comfortable.
Mm.
Even if it's a discomfort in the comfort, it's like even if it's not working and maybe it's a relationship that is just fraught with challenges. It's really difficult for human beings to step outside of the comfort of the known into
Yeah.
the discomfort of the unknown. But the only way that we can actually grow is by taking that step. And little steps, baby steps is fine, but that's part of the problem is that so many I think leaders really lean on behaviors of the past or
Mm.
lean on habits that have served them in the past, even when they know at an intellectual level they don't necessarily work anymore. Stepping into that new space is scary.
Yeah.
And so that's where you have to give them support. And again, it's about creating that environment where they can try something different
Yeah.
and then test it for themselves and see how it works. And again, practice it because again, you've got to have to shift one habit for another habit. And when things are going great, it's very easy to try something new. Like, oh, this is fantastic. Everything's working well. The minute there's pressure or something goes wrong, it's very easy to slip back into the old way of working. So we have to make sure the environment is there to be able to support them to continue to move forward because everybody takes a step back. It's just that's what life is about, right? So how do you take the next step forward and continue to move towards the goal?
So, how can leaders identify behaviors that no longer serve them?
A lot of this is around self-awareness. And for so many leaders, that's a challenge because they don't often have the space in their day-to-day to be able to ask for that input from others. And so I like to leverage assessments that will help them to become a little more aware of their impact on other people. So
Yeah.
they'll assess their own ability or their perceived ability to do these things, and then they'll ask others like, "What are you seeing?" And there's a gap between these two things. So often we don't necessarily give ourselves enough credit for what we do really well.
Yeah.
And sometimes we think we do something well that other people aren't actually experiencing or observing in us. And so closing that gap through more awareness is so important because then they can start to see, okay, so I'm seeing friction in this environment, or I'm struggling, I'm feeling something viscerally when I'm dealing with board members, or I'm struggling with some of my team members, or my manager and I, we just can't connect well. We can't gel. I can't get my team to engage and really move forward. They're not performing. Where there's that sense of friction, or that sense of a feeling of discomfort.
Yeah.
Just noticing that and taking the time to think about what's actually driving that for them often can help them to see, okay, now what's my role in that situation, and how am I preserving the status quo, and what do I need to change in order to overcome the assumptions that might be driving my behavior and that are invalid, right? So testing their assumptions is important, and then be able to then move forward to say, okay, well, how can I shift my perception of the situation and the opportunity in taking action, and then take that action. And so I think it all starts with pausing, recognizing the problem, identifying what it is, and then moving forward with, okay, how could I do this differently, or how can I change my behavior in order to get a different result?
Awesome. You help organizations create resilient, high-performing teams. What separates exceptional teams from average ones?
Interestingly enough, a lot of high-performing teams are fantastic at groupthink.
Yeah.
So they might have worked together for a long time. Everybody knows each other. They all get along. It all works really well.
Yeah.
Everybody understands where they have to contribute. The challenge with that is that often some of those teams, in the desire to be high performing and to have a really healthy culture, often those teams will avoid conflict, and they will avoid, presenting problems. They might avoid having a debate about a solution or something that they want to present, because they don't want to be a naysayer. So the irony is that those teams that perform exceptionally well are those that can tolerate healthy debate and healthy conflict, not fighting amongst themselves, but arguing the merits of different ways of doing things, considering that maybe their solution is not the one that should be put forward, and asking for others to give their input. So teams that can do this well and can tolerate dissenting opinions, different perspectives, and maybe even shift their own perspective as a result of somebody else saying, I think we should consider something different.
Yeah.
They can tolerate that discomfort without feeling like it's going to break down trust or it's going to make people feel attacked. Those teams are really the most high-performing teams. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone gets along 24/7. It doesn't necessarily that everyone sort of skips along in the same direction. But it does mean that they'll argue it out and then come out of there with a unified approach, and everyone will get behind the plan and will be all in, if you like. So there's a bit of storming, and then off they go together. And those are really healthy teams, because often if they don't challenge themselves, you'll end up with mediocrity. And so that's what makes that healthy debate really, really important. And I think a lot of teams that I work with, I try to instill this idea that they have an obligation when they truly don't believe something is the right thing to do, the right approach, the right solution, whatever it is. So if they don't speak up, they're actually doing a disservice to the rest of the team.
Yeah.
Because it's so important for their perspective to be heard. And by the same token, it's also an obligation on the part of the rest of the team to truly listen and try to understand their perspective. And so you get that conversation versus just instruction.
Awesome. That's very good. So what behavior destroys team effectiveness?
Lack of trust. There's a few things that will destroy trust. So one is naming and shaming. So the other one is taking credit for other people's work. And I think the third one is just not feeling valued and not feeling heard and appreciated. And so leaders are so critical to this. Is one, they have to be very aware that if there are naming and shaming instances going on in the organization, that they have to be very careful to stop that right away. And then making sure that the people who are doing the work get credit for it, but also that the leader doesn't take credit for the work that their team is doing, that they actually give them the glory as well, because it is a reflection on the leader anyway. And then finally, the big thing with trust is to always be really conscious that not everybody wants the same kind of recognition. And not everybody feels valued in the same way.
Yeah.
And so when leaders give some kind of recognition to a person on their team for doing a great job, sometimes that can make the person uncomfortable. Sometimes the rest of the team feels like, wow, you didn't recognize any of my work. So recognition and trust are really, really intertwined as well, because the leader has to think about how people want to be valued and appreciated, but also the fact that, are they valuing and appreciating the right work from the
Yeah.
right people, and not leaving high performers who always get on with it, doing all the work, when somebody else is not necessarily towing the line or holding up their end of the bargain, but is getting recognized and appreciated for what little they're doing. So it's that balance in appreciation is so important for trust as well. But I think one of the most important ones is just to make sure that there's no water cooler conversation, there's no belittling of people in meetings if they come up with ideas, or have different opinions,
Yeah.
and that they feel that they are appreciated, that they're heard, their voice is important. Yeah, I think those are the most important ones. But trust is a very fragile thing, and it takes consistency in behavior to build trust.
Yeah. So let's move to the next question. Organizations today are dealing with constant change. Why do humans naturally resist uncertainty?
It comes down to the saber tooth again. We're very comfortable. The brain loves patterns. Our brain is a predictive machine, or it likes to think it is anyway. So the brain doesn't like surprises. It doesn't like uncertainty. It likes to know that we have a plan, we know how to work the plan, and we've got this. And so that's what happens when there's uncertainty, or there's confusion, or there's transformation, or something is going on that's shaking that world for us.
Yeah.
Our brain naturally goes to the oldest part of our brain, which is the amygdala, the they call this the lizard brain. It's the tiny little piece in the middle of our brain, and this is the fear center, right? So uncertainty triggers the amygdala, because the amygdala's role is to keep us safe.
Yeah.
So uncertainty triggers our amygdala to say, oh my gosh, am I safe? Am I okay? Am I getting fired? Am I getting in trouble? Am I losing a client? Whatever the uncertainty is, the amygdala sees that as a threat.
Yeah.
And so our brain is constantly scanning for these things. And that's when that old saber tooth raises its head again, in whatever form it is for you. That's going to talk straight to your amygdala and say, I'm a threat. And the amygdala is going to go, oh my gosh. And that's when we get people reacting, right? And getting people like nervous or confrontational or defensive, whatever it is. But if we can understand that, and then take a moment to calm ourselves down, and sometimes that's a physical calming down, then we can think about the threat as not necessarily a threat, but as something that we can actually handle. Because in the past, we may have handled things like this in the past before. We've got skills. We've all gotten to this old age because we've survived, right? Well, that must tell us something. So we can then use our frontal lobe, which is now going to shut down the amygdala and that little voice in our heads, and it's going to say, okay, I know this is tough, this is difficult, it's uncomfortable, but I know I can handle it. What can I do? What's one step I can take in the right direction? So again, our natural inclination is to go, ugh, I don't like it. I don't like uncertainty. It's our brains hate uncertainty. But if we can show our brains that we've actually got a plan. We could deal with this because we've done the work, we've done the analysis, we've done the research, we've thought it through. We're thinking about what the options are. We've bounced the idea off somebody else. Maybe we've validated our assumptions around this thing. That can help our brain to calm down, and then to be able to step into that uncertainty with a little bit more of a willingness to understand that we have the capability to deal with it. But we have to shut down that amygdala first, and that's the tough part.
Okay, that's very good. So what distinguishes organizations that thrive during uncertainty?
I think organizations that know or understand that uncertainty is just the normal. There's never been certainty ever in any organization. So I think understanding that, even though our biology is saying, oh my gosh, this is bad, I don't know what's coming, that we have a capacity to navigate through that, and we've proven that over and over and over. I think reflecting on that is helpful for organizations. And then really just being able to help their teams and their leaders and the people that are actually driving through that change, to navigate through it by putting the support system in place to help them to do that without shutting down and being completely paralyzed by it. Those are the organizations that will continue to thrive. The organizations that I think, react with, over emotional reactions, or just don't respond but react to changes or to the uncertainty and make sometimes rash decisions, I think will be the ones that struggle. But what organizations that thrive do is that they adapt, because they know that people have the muscle to adapt with them.
Okay, that's great. You've coached countless leaders over the years. What are the most common challenges executives bring to the coaching?
A lot of it is around, there's twofold. One is a lot of executives are just struggling for themselves. They're struggling with burnout, feeling stretched too thin, feeling frustrated, I think, in a lot of cases with where they are in their career, but then also struggling with how they can bring their team along. How can they engage their people, inspire them, get them excited about the work? Because in some cases, if they're not excited about the work, it's really hard to get other people to be excited about the work. So I think for a lot of executives, first it's working on their own level of engagement, excitement, how in are they as far as the goal and the objective of the organization is. And then also assessing how they can then bring others along on the journey. How can they inspire others to see the vision? How can they bring them to a place where they want to engage, people want to follow them? And how do they feel good at the end of the day when they leave the office or the desk and can look back on the day and say, well, I feel really good about what I did today, and I feel really good about how my team showed up as well. So it's really engagement, building trust, and then also just helping think about their own ability to navigate through, because leaders are under as much, if not more, pressure than everyone else in the organization. They've got such a lot of demands on them, and they're also human. So they have the same fears, the same concerns, the same, challenges in their lives that a lot of their teams are dealing with. But it's almost a they're alone on the island kind of feeling for a lot of them. It's like I'm alone. There's no one to support me, or no one I can just chat to and share some of my fears and concerns and worries with. So I think that's a lot of what leaders need, is just to be able to take that space and again think about what do they need.
Awesome. Let's go.
There was a leader I was coaching a few years ago, and to your point about this, what do leaders need that we just spoke about? He was really struggling with his team, his engagement. He was very demanding. He had high standards. He really wanted a lot from his team. They weren't performing the way he wanted them to. And so he tended to be quite aggressive, demanding, maybe sometimes a little belittling to his team. And then he would go home in the evenings, and he would be with his family, and he would be the same with his family. And it was really wearing on his family and wearing on him, because at a deep level, he truly cared about his team. He cared about his family, obviously. And he was a very, kind person, but the environment was so pressured that he'd become a leader that he didn't want to be. And so we worked on his communication style and the why behind his reaction. So why was he snapping at people or jumping down their throat or just making them feel really bad about what they were doing? And it was really because he was worried about them failing. And so, but he didn't know how to support them in taking a risk without, attacking them if they did fail. And so we worked on him enabling them to work within guardrails. So he communicated what they needed to do and how they needed to focus on the outcome. But he forced himself to step back from his expectation that they would do it the way he wanted it done. And when he did that, and then he supported the outcome, and then he would reflect with them on what went well and what didn't, and how they were going to then change it if they didn't do so well. It took all that pressure off him, and it made him a more empathetic leader.
Mm.
And as a result, when he went home to his family with his young children, he wasn't bringing that same energy home with him.
Yeah.
And so it helped the relationships on both sides. And it also helped him to be kinder to himself because he started to, through this process, recognize his triggers
Yeah.
for attacking or being belittling or, dismissing somebody was that fear. The same fear that they felt coming to him with a problem, he felt by allowing them to, come with a solution. So he dealt with his own fear and then helped them deal with theirs. And it was remarkable to see how it transformed. I mean, he got promoted up through the organization as a result, and people loved working with him. I think his own stress levels went down remarkably, and his health improved as a result as well, because he wasn't dealing with that ongoing stress. Yeah.
So, Tracey, after a decade of helping leaders and organization thrive, what do you believe is the single most important leadership capabilities for the future?
I think humanity, being human, being empathetic, understanding that every human being is unique and they need different things. You can't, one size does not fit everybody.
Yeah.
But I think also just acknowledging that people are your biggest asset if you're a leader. There's no leader on the planet that can get anywhere without the people that work with them. And so I think just acknowledging that, and also just thinking about how do we bring humanity to a workplace that's increasingly digital and increasingly sort of isolated, if you like. So how do we think about it? Like, how do you have a workplace where humans are excited to be part of it? They're loyal, they're dedicated, and this goes both ways, loyalty from the employer, and vice versa. How do you nurture and grow those humans, and how do you build the next generation of leaders? I think those are going to be important things for leaders to think about. And specifically to do that in a world that is becoming less and less human and more and more disconnected. It's like, how are you going to bring people together to do good things together versus, in isolation?
Tracey, thank you for joining us today and sharing such valuable insights. One of the biggest takeaways from this conversation is that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about having the awareness, resilience, and the courage to navigate uncertainty while staying deeply connected to people. Technology may continue to evolve, AI may transform how we work, but trust, empathy, communication, and human connection will always remain at the heart of exceptional leadership. Thank you, Tracey, and to everyone listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to contact Tracey, because I'm going to leave her information in the description box while we post it on our channel. Feel free to contact her and learn more, because she has really brought good insight in her work to us. And of course, it's up to us to take hold of it and leverage it and see how it works better for us. So until next time, lead with purpose, lead with courage, and most importantly, lead with humanity. I'm your host, Phoebe, and thank you for joining us today, Tracey. And to everyone listening, thank you and bye-bye. Thank you, Tracey. Right. Thank you very much. Have a great day, Tracey. Bye.
Thank you.